Ladies and gentlemen, clients, friends, and family of Bay Area Cancer Connections, welcome to your 18th annual Virtual Cancer Conference. Today, we are each in a unique and special place, for even though we are separated only by distance, we are all right here, right now, present for and with each other. Together, we are sharing knowledge and inspiring hope. Please welcome Bay Area Cancer Connections Executive Director, Rina Bello.
Good morning and welcome to Bay Area Cancer Connections 18th Annual Virtual Cancer Conference. Before we begin our day, I want to take a moment to thank all of you on behalf of our Board of Directors and staff for spending this special day with us. This is one of my favorite events because it's a privilege to see us come together to share knowledge and experiences, which is at the heart of the success of this conference. Learning from each other and hearing other people's personal experiences is extremely valuable for all of us. We have a wonderful program planned for you, and I'd like to give a warm welcome to our speakers and thank them for sharing their wisdom with us. Today is a wonderful example of the community that we have created over the last 28 years. I am constantly amazed and inspired by all of the extraordinary people, including all of you who are the heart of BACC. COVID-19 has continued to turn our world upside down, and we continue to face uncertainty. But Bay Area Cancer Connections has risen to the challenge and has continued to be a beacon of hope for families facing cancer during this challenging time. Through our virtual programming, we have expanded our reach, and we've been able to significantly increase the number of people who are able to access our programs and services. Our mobile resource center has officially launched. We are now able to bring critical cancer supportive services throughout the Bay Area. We continue to work as hard as we can to ease the cancer burden, particularly for communities that are underrepresented and underserved. No one knows what the future holds, but we promise you that Bay Area Cancer Connections will always be here to ensure that no one faces cancer alone. Okay, let's get our day started. We are very fortunate to have the support of our generous sponsors. We'd like to thank our ally sponsors, El Camino Health and Stanford Cancer Institute, our friend sponsors, Kaiser Permanente and Pink Power at the PJCC, and our supporter sponsors, AstraZeneca, Mission Hospice and Home Care, and Puma Biotechnology. We hope you enjoyed visiting the resource fair. The fair will be open during the lunch break if you weren't able to attend this morning. Feel free to pop in and visit the sponsors and exhibitors or pick up some additional resources. We'd also like to thank the Bay Area Black Nurses Association for providing CEUs for nurses attending today's conference. This day would not have been possible without the generosity of all of these incredible people. In addition to our sponsors and partners, we also have a new partner we'd like to introduce, Stanford Medicine's Technology-Enabled Clinical Improvement Center. We encourage you to look out for more information about them during the first afternoon break, where you will have the chance to watch a brief video they created to learn more about this technology used to facilitate breast self-exam training, take their 18-question survey, and receive a $15 Amazon gift card for your participation. I would also like to give a very special thank you to our incredible leader, Jeanette Gonzalez, Director of Programs and Services. I want to thank her for her leadership, her hard work, and all of her efforts to organize this wonderful event. I'd also like to thank our staff and volunteers who have also been working hard to make this day special. Today's presentations will be recorded and made available to you in case you missed anything or if you'd like to rewatch any of the sessions. Each keynote speaker will speak for about 30 to 45 minutes, and there will be about 10 to 15 minutes for Q&A. For those of you with questions, please type these into the Q&A box, and we will compile them and do our best to get to as many of them as possible. We also hope you will enjoy the picture slideshow you see today, which are made up of a collection of our memories of conferences over the past 18 years. Since we aren't able to gather in person today, we thought it would be nice to celebrate our amazing community by taking a stroll through conferences past. Please note, the medical information provided today should not be considered medical advice or used for the purposes of diagnosis or treatment. Each medical condition is unique, We strongly advise you to consult with your physician about questions regarding your own situation or any of the information provided today, as it may relate to your specific case. The views and opinions expressed at various presentations do not necessarily represent those of Bay Area Cancer Connections. If you have any trouble accessing today's presentations, please refer back to the email you received with instructions for today's conference, or call our helpline at 650-326-6686, or email us at info@bayareacancer.org. This information is also located in the upper right-hand corner of the conference homepage. Now, I would like to introduce you to a phenomenal person I am lucky to call a colleague and friend. BACC's Board President, Pamela Ratliff. All of us at Bay Area Cancer Connections are grateful for her leadership during this exceptional time that has called for exceptional action. Ladies and gentlemen, Pamela Ratliff.
Thank you, Rina, for that warm introduction. I'm delighted to be here with all of you today. We have a great lineup of speakers that we hope you will enjoy and are excited to get today's presentation started with topics that I think all of us can benefit from learning more about, which are empathy, compassion, and how to care for ourselves and others during difficult times. We're pleased to have an expert with us, Dale Larson, to help guide us on this journey. Dr. Dale Larson is a professor of counseling psychology at Santa Clara University, clinical psychologist, Fulbright Scholar, and a fellow in 3 divisions of the American Psychological Association. He is the author of The Helper's Journey, Empathy, Compassion, and the Challenge of Caring. Dale's research and writings on stress and resilience, grief and loss, grief counseling, and self-concealment and secrets are widely cited, both in the scientific literature and in the popular media. He is a frequent keynote speaker at national and international conferences, has lectured widely for healthcare organizations during the pandemic, received the Association for Deaf Education and Counseling Deaf Educator Award in 2016, and was honored as an innovator of hospice and palliative care by the National Hospice Foundation in 2018. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Dr. Dale Larson.
Good morning, everyone. It's really a pleasure to be here. Thank you for those kind words and for having this phenomenal conference and inviting me to participate. I think it's just extraordinary what Bay Area Cancer Connections does for us. They connect us, and they're connecting us today. I think they deserve at least a sitting standing ovation. We can't give a standing ovation very easily, so bravo. I'm a big admirer and fan, and I think we all are feeling a lot of gratitude for what they have done and what they're doing for us all today. This morning, I want to, and for West Coast people, others maybe it's the afternoon, I want to talk about empathy and compassion and resilience and hope and purpose in life. And a central theme is going to be based on research, my own work and work of others, and my own experience as a clinician, is that helping others, being a caregiver, doing good is good for us. And this is supported by a very exciting new set of studies. And I want to share some of that with you, and I want to really try to give a strong argument that and a very optimistic and hopeful kind of argument that we can become all we can become through helping others and through supporting each other in these difficult times. And yes, we are doing all this in very difficult times, and I don't need to remind anybody about how difficult our times are. We were all shocked in March 2020 is really when it really came home in America by the COVID pandemic. And it has had effects that are so far reaching that it's almost going to take decades to document them and to study them. One of the consequences has been that the social distancing, or the physical distancing, we prefer to call it, has had a tremendous impact, and it's impacted all the things I'm going to be talking about today: our connections with each other, our empathy, our self-care, our social support, all the things that we can do to strengthen our resilience have been challenged. We have seen just these effects throughout our society, and we're all living with them every day. And loneliness is another major factor or outcome in this pandemic that's being studied extensively by psychologists right now. And loneliness itself predicts mortality. So we're battling against a lot of these forces that the pandemic has introduced. And this is one of the themes that I want to bring up today. How can we do that? Sometimes, at least I am reminded of the film The Day the Earth Stood Still, when Klaatu arrived with Gord, his robot, and they said to all of us on Earth, you have to change your ways, you have to do things differently, you have to stop your violence, or we're going to incinerate the Earth. Well, the arrival of COVID had somewhat of the same effect in terms of its chilling effect on the world. It affected everyone on planet Earth, and things kind of stopped, literally, just as they did in that movie. But I'd like to think about it in terms of our experience of mortality and the reality of the fragility of life. I think everyone on the planet had this ego chill experience, we call it, this shudder that stems from the sudden awareness of the definite possibility of non-being. And that has been very dramatic worldwide, and we've seen it in people who haven't thought about the reality of, oh, life, is it fragile? All I can say is welcome planet Earth to our world, the world of oncology and end-of-life care. I have a client who's bereaved, lost her son, and she said that when the world slowed down, suddenly it was in sync with me, because I felt frozen and unable to go forward. And in a way, it was comforting in a way, because it was her feeling like, okay, the rest of the world is realizing what I've come to know, which is that life is fragile, and that it really requires our full attention. When we look at what is happening in terms of the consequences of the COVID pandemic, we psychologists study things, immediately developing measures. We've developed the COVID stress syndrome measure, the COVID grief measure. But if you look at some of these items from this scale, you see things that are pretty familiar, like the compulsive checking and reassurance seeking. I came up with an acronym that I maybe jokingly recommend to the next DSM, which was SCARED, Situational Coronavirus Activated Relational Disorder. That's that feeling you have when you're approaching somebody. Can I hug them? How close can I get? Well, this is functional now, but this is something that I hope soon we can kind of leave behind and restore some of our normal interpersonal connections, which are so vital to our health. But this pandemic has had such a dramatic impact in so many ways. 1/5 of Americans have lost a close friend or a relative to COVID. There have been 760 deaths, but there have been 45 million cases. There have been so many people who have been bereaved during this time, and it's been a very different kind of bereavement. I think the novel coronavirus has created a novel form of traumatic bereavement that's going to stretch far into the future for so many people. The current estimates are that 1/2 to 1 million Americans will have either a prolonged or complicated form of grief going on in the years ahead. Now, this is dramatic, and it's been different for different populations. This is a perfect storm. This COVID has been a perfect storm in so many ways, but it's a storm in which we're in different boats. There's incredible health disparities. There are differences among different subgroups in our country and in the world who are suffering much more from this. It is really an issue for the entire planet, and we're trying to think in psychology and healthcare, how can we possibly address this? But I want to point out something. The same period that I'm talking about, 900,000 people have died from cancer. Yeah, and an equal number have died have lost their loved ones not through COVID, from COVID, but they've lost it for all the reasons that people were losing people before COVID. And this is very important to remember. And I think that there's an element here of disenfranchisement that can happen. You know, my dad died of cancer. Oh, did he? Oh, was it COVID? No, it wasn't COVID. It was a heart disease. Oh, or it was cancer, or it was whatever. And the person suddenly isn't that interested. You know, disenfranchisement of grief, disenfranchisement of illness, are realities, and that's one of the reasons we have to make more efforts to do things like Bay Area Cancer Connections is doing with this conference, and what we all try to do in our work together, supporting each other in these difficult times. The challenge of caring, as I write about it, is how do we find a way? So this is what is being challenged right now, is the challenge of caring. And this primarily is addressing caregivers, but broadly construed. So it's not just doctors, nurses, social workers, and mental health people, but all of us together, relating to people who are in distress, or our family members and others that we're trying to support, that we have to find a way to be emotionally involved, to take our helping motivations, that innate altruism, and our empathy and compassion and commitment, and put it to work courageously. And I think it is courageous to approach all these experiences, which we all know in this room, and to find a way to live with hope in a world where loss is inescapable. It's one of the ways I construe what we're ultimately facing as a challenge. Now, to help us understand resilience and what I'm going to talk about as ways to enhance our resilience, and how I conceptualize stress, it's really important to think, I find, in terms of the model that Dick Lazarus, who was my teacher at Berkeley when I did my doctoral studies there, presented. And Dick had a model of stress that included the appraisal process. How are we interpreting things? And he had two fundamental appraisals. First is, am I okay? And the second is, can I deal with this if I'm not okay? Now with cancer, very often the first appraisal is a little bit difficult to get a solid hold on. Am I okay? I'm not sure if I'm okay. I mean, I have this diagnosis and now the treatment, and then it's 2 years out, it's 5 years out. I'm doing great, but we have that uncertainty sometimes that kind of rattles us. And then can I cope with this in different situations? How do I know in advance whether I can cope with it? But what Dick found is that these mediators are so important, and this is true in the entire stress literature: optimism, self-esteem, sense of control, self-efficacy, a la Bandura, I'll talk about that later, social support. These affect these appraisals, and this is the way we can build our resilience in the face of stress, and in the face of cancer, and in the face of all other difficult life events. So it's we're going to talk a little bit about appraisal, and a lot of the things that I'll be mentioning that can be really helpful to us can be framed in terms of appraisal processes. Now, I want to really zero in on just a few of the resilience enhancing strategies that I find be most important. We could add to this list great detail on any of them: exercise, social support, but I'm going to touch on balanced empathy and positive reappraisal, conversations, mindfulness, self-compassion, and meaning and purpose as key ways that we can enhance our resilience. And I'll explain what I mean with each of these. Now, before I do that, let me just give you one piece of good news. This was a study in Canada where they found that, and they write, our findings represent a very hopeful message for cancer patients, their families, and their healthcare providers. 2/3 of current Canadian cancer patients aged 50 and over are in CMH, complete mental health, which sounds rather fantastical, but it's really wonderful, reporting that they are happy and satisfied with their life, that they have high levels of social and psychological well-being, that they are completely free of mental illness, suicidal thoughts, and substance dependence. 3 in every 4 former cancer patients are in complete mental health in their terminology, which is comparable to the prevalence of complete mental health among those who never had cancer. Isn't that interesting? Now, we could get into the details with this, and you might say, well, what about the other 1/4? Am I in that 1/4, et cetera, et cetera? Well, it seems like all of us, as we go along, are in that other 1/4. So it's a very optimistic finding. Encourage a lot of hope as we're kind of struggling with, well, how will things be? Resilience is something that's real, and what we're finding is that cancer patients find their way toward this state of better mental health, and that's a very positive outcome. So what about balance? What about empathy? I've said that, if we have balanced empathy, if we have compassion, they can also be tremendous stress buffers, which is a surprising way to look at things. We tend to think of empathy as causing problems because I'm empathic and I'm going to become distressed. Yes, if you become distressed, it is a problem. You need to find a way to be empathically engaged and allow that to develop into compassion. So empathy can lead to compassion. Actually, they light up different parts of the brain. If you're in empathic distress, you have the pain center activated. If you're into compassionate experience, you have the pleasure center of the brain activated. So fascinating neuroscience on this. But the continuum of emotional involvement I often talk about is, this engagement. We're moving back and forth all the time. You can think about this with, family members in distress, or, with somebody, if you're a professional helper working with a patient, or a family member. But we move back and forth on this continuum. And at each end of this continuum, we have personal distress. So on the left side, we have more toward burnout. On the right side, we have a greater experience of, personal distress when we're overly involved. And one of the ways that I've found helpful in teaching about this and talking about this is to think of it in terms of a helper's pit. So as the helper, you are back on, I was going to go back to that again. I'll go back here. Oh, no, I'm going forward. Oh, I need to go back to the earlier slide with the pit. Yeah. One more back. Yeah, thank you. So the idea is we have to, as we're helping anyone who's in distress, we have to find a way to reach into the pit and help them out of the pit without falling into the pit ourselves. This is the key. And so what do we do to enable that to happen? We have to find a way to use our faith, our communication skills, all our resources, social support, all the resilience enhancing things that we have in our lives. The sense of efficacy. I can actually reach into the pit and take the hand of the other and help them out of the pit without falling into the pit, because people in pits do not need us in the pit with them. So this is the challenge, how to be empathically engaged without falling into what I call the helper's pit. And the mental health people can talk about it in terms of countertransference or identification. But I think it's familiar to us all. And how do you distinguish if I'm saying emotional involvement's very important, and I believe it is in helping, how do we distinguish between being in the pit and not being in the pit? I think it's the difference between sobbing and crying. I once asked 5,000 nurses I was speaking to, how many of you have ever had a tear in your eye when you're talking to cancer patients? This is at the oncology conference. And none of them all of them raised their hand for that. But when I said, how many of you did you have the person you were talking to leave the room saying, my nurse is having a feeling? None of them raised their hand, because people want to know that you care. They want to know that you care almost as much as they want to know that you have that technical expertise. For sure, they want both. So how do we find a way to reach into the pit without falling into the pit and maintain balanced empathy? Another central discovery in the research, and James Gross at Stanford is doing some great work on this, on emotion regulation, and this really comes out of Dick Lazarus's work ultimately, and it's the idea that positively reappraising versus suppressing our emotions and suppressing what we're experiencing is much better in terms of outcomes. So we need to have a way to achieve a different perspective on things. And I know this sounds simplistic and, oh yeah, it'd be easy to think more positively about things, but new perspectives are critical. In depression, they're critical in coping with any negative life event. What we don't want to do is suppress our experiences, and we want instead to kind of step back a little bit and take a look at what's happening. One of the ways that we've studied this is stress hardiness, and Sal Maddie at the University of Chicago, where I did my undergraduate work, was a pioneer in this with Susan Cabasa. And what the saying that comes out of their literature and their research, which is quite extensive, is we need to make a commitment, take control, and see a challenge. So to not disengage, to not detach, to not feel that, oh, I can't deal with this, to not slip into demoralization, which is one of the key features of burnout. And I didn't really discuss too much about how burnout has been amplified for these courageous health providers who've worked with us risking their lives during this COVID pandemic. But burnout has been a major feature, also secondary traumatization, and then moral distress, because when you're triaging ventilators, you have moral distress, as you can imagine. But with stress hardiness, the idea of, make a commitment, take control, and see a challenge versus seeing a threat. This is a key one. How many of us are waiting for things to settle down? And that's a trick question. You don't want to be doing that. Things are not going to settle down. Yeah, we might think, how could they not settle down after COVID? Well, it'd probably be easier in a lot of ways, but things are still going to keep moving, and there's going to be a lot of change, and we need to, and it's certainly true with the cancer experience, we have to really, see challenge. And if we're prone to seeing threats, you can see how that can initiate the stress cycle for us. We don't want to have a Pollyanna approach and be into denial, but we want to be able to look at things from different perspectives. Another way people have looked at resilience, and I have two takes on this. I just found this the other day, and this is a measure of resilience in cancer, and I think, yeah, it's very positive and very upbeat, but one of the dangers of measures like this is, we can read it and go, oh no, I'm not doing any of that. I don't feel any of that. I don't think any of that. I must be causing my own illness or lowering my immunological functioning. And I think that that's the danger in these kind of measures. But you can see from a methodological standpoint, people who answer this in these ways, this scale for resilience in cancer, are likely to say, yeah, I'm feeling better, I'm happier, and all that as well. So you have some method variants, but I won't get into the research on that. But it's interesting that this is one of the ways that people are now looking at resilience. And yeah, it's positive to think, good fortune will come, feel the happiness in my life when we can find that. That's so wonderful. Pay more attention to the family, try to see the good side. Yeah, these are all good things. Sometimes it's a struggle to get to that place, and especially when we're in a very difficult phase in our illness or in our coping. Another thing that we can do that really helps, and this is, we know cancer conversations are always very challenging. I did this senior editor for the Finding Our Way, Living with Dying in America national newspaper series, where we had 15 authors write about different topics. And one of my topic was on conversations. And this was with Janet Perloff here in the photo, who was dealing with stage 3 breast cancer. And she was talking about and developed a program actually for talking to your children about your illness, and very powerful experienced working with her, and this article is available online if you just search for Finding Our Way, Living with Dying in America. But these conversations are so important, and what I'm saying is we need to have those conversations, and there are multiple levels of conversation. There are conversations during treatment. How can we find ways to talk to our physicians and nurses and other people? The navigators can help. I know there's some on board today, and all the palliative care people or oncology people, and everyone together can really work with us to help us navigate, to use that term, the care that we're receiving, in oncology. Something I've done a lot of work with is self-concealment. I developed a self-concealment scale. It's now used in a couple hundred studies, but the basic idea here is that we need to not keep our difficult experiences to ourselves and never share them with anyone. And it's not about sharing them online in social media. It's about having a confidant. And there are some secrets that we possess, there are other secrets that possess us. Winnicott said it's a joy to be hidden, but it's a disaster not to be found, And I think that it's really important that when we have distressing inner experiences, we overcome some of the barriers that exist in society to sharing them. And there are lots of barriers. People don't want to hear about cancer. They're terrified by it. It pushes their buttons, their death anxiety buttons. They don't want to talk about it very much. So that's why we need each other. We need things like this conference. We need support groups. We need caring professionals. We need all the folks who can openly and freely engage empathically with us about this experience. And obviously support groups are wonderful because you have that instant empathy. And just like in this room, we have so much instant empathy for everything that's going to be talked about today. It's just such an exciting thing to be able to, for us all to meet together in this space. I've lots of research on this, and self-concealment has all kinds of difficult and troublesome effects on our psychological and physical health. It plays out in all kinds of ways in healthcare and in psychology. And it really is difficult for us when we have an urge to reveal. We have distress, and then we have the urge to conceal happening at the same time. And that conflict, that dual mode of conflict, is what creates real problems. So we want help, we need help. That's ancestral plane behavior. When we're distressed, it's natural to go to others and seek their help, to tell them about our experience. Think about any distressing experience you have. You want to share it, but then there are so many constraints. Nobody wants to hear about this. Who could understand? Then we have stigma that can prevent us from sharing, and shame, all of which are almost tragically present when we have any major illness or we have some trauma. So we have to overcome that. We have to have these conversations, and it does take courage to have those conversations. It's not easy. None of these conversations is easy from any side, from health professionals to family members to us if we have are dealing with cancer. Just before I did the research and have done the research on self-concealment, Jamie Pennebaker was doing his work on experimental disclosure, having people just write about their traumas and difficulties, studying bereaved people who did not disclose their experience and seeing the health consequences of that. But he made the very bold assertion that the act of not discussing or confiding an event with another may be more damaging than having experienced the event per se. So the message here is have a confidant, have someone you can share your full experience with and all the parts inside that you're feeling like, oh, I don't know, I'm not feeling so good about myself in how I'm dealing with this, or this is so painful, this is so stressful. There is someone, you have to find someone you can share with. And when you do that, things change. Pennebaker found that just writing things out for 15 minutes over 4 days each day led to improved immunological functioning and better outcomes on all kinds of measures. Just writing it out, getting it out of yourself, out of that echo chamber. So we've got to get things out of the echo chamber. And what Dan Wegner found at Harvard is that he did the famous white bear studies. He found that trying to suppress things, and this is also consistent with the findings of James Gross at Stanford on suppression. Suppression is not good and reappraising is better. But Wegner did studies where he told subjects, don't think about a white bear. And of course, well, they stopped thinking about the white bear. And then we know what happened. The white bear came back, and then they tried to stop thinking about it, and then what happened? The white bear came back, and then they tried to not think about it, and the white bear came back. So ruminating is a problem. There's reflective rumination, which is, okay, we're all going to reflect on our situation, whatever it is, but we don't want to try to suppress it. We want to have reflective rumination is how we're talking about it in psychology now, not this rumination that leads to kind of an obsessive kind of quality with it, because we try to suppress, and then that's what happens with the secrets, is that they keep re-emerging. We call it the ironic rebound effect. Oh, there was still another bear there. Now, I want to say one of the experiences I've had with this disclosing experiences and the power of that was many years ago. I volunteered for several years with a program we developed, a weekend, and we had recently diagnosed cancer patients and their families. We had a grant. It was wonderful. And we went away to a beautiful site. We had their family members there, their children or grandparents, all kinds of folks from their family. And we began it with, in a large room, we had everybody write out on these apples their hopes and fears. So on one side of the apple, they wrote their fear, and on the other, they wrote their hope. And so you can see that this one is there can be enough time, and then the other, I can cope. I can't quite read it too well on my screen right now, but I'll read some others. The fear was depression. The hope was cure. The fear of another person. So imagine we're sitting in a room and these people don't know each other, and we're sharing these. They wrote them out and then passed them around so they were anonymous, which provided some safety. I have a hard time describing what it felt like to be in that room. I reviewed it recently with a colleague who was there with me, who's had one of these framed with both sides showing, because he was so moved by it himself. It was Lars Nissen. The fear is I will not be able to give my wife the support she needs. The hope is we can cope with cancer and still lead a normal family life. Another, a fear that spouse will have a great deal of pain and the family will have a difficult time dealing with it. The hope that we can learn to accept what will happen with courage, support, love, and to continue caring for each other as a family and individually. And finally, I think this was a young person. We didn't have small children, but we had teenagers, that my mom won't let any of us fear is my mom won't let any of us help her, and something worse is going to happen, and everyone is left feeling guilty because nothing was done. The hope that the family situation will improve, communication, openness, forgiveness, patience, that there is hope. That was just a beautiful moment. And, it was the things that we shared, the fears might have been submerged for the entire weekend. Instead, they were brought out and we were able to talk about those things. I've got to say, though, when we put the apples up on the wall, we put the hopes out. And the fears were behind, but we knew about them, and we were talking about them when we needed to. So I think it was a beautiful exercise, which I think and moment in my life, and we did it several years. It was always amazing. Now, we have all heard a lot about mindfulness, and we know its importance, and it's a way of relating to our own inner experience in an accepting way, and engaging with that, and being open to it, and being open to others, and it helps us find a real center, paying attention in a particular way on purpose in the present moment, non-judgmentally. We had John Kabat-Zinn out a few years ago to Santa Clara to speak, and it's a very, very positive thing, and it does really assist us in terms of being resilient, because we're not just diving into our experiences and being overwhelmed. We need to have a little bit of distance. We need to be accepting toward our experience. And again, back to mining our emotions. One of the things that we've learned is that we need emotional differentiation. There's that initial feeling of like, I feel terrible. Oh, I'm so panicked. But we've got to go beyond that. We have to have emotional differentiation. Underneath that initial reaction, which is just distress, global distress, we have more adaptive emotions that we can learn from. Dick Lazarus, again, said that emotions have the wisdom of the ages in them. They are what guide us. So we have a saying, popular saying, name it to tame it, name it to claim it, feel it to heal it. But there's information there. It's like not being in touch with those emotions and learning from them. Is like having your GPS only tell you like what city you're in. So we need to really look at and experience and accept our emotions. This is important in terms of establishing our resilience. Mindfulness can even affect our telomeres. These are the nucleoproteins that are on the tips of our chromosomes, and these prevent replicative senescence, basically aging in a way, and they're great biomarkers of where we're at health-wise, stress-wise. People who have had adverse childhood experiences as children have shorter telomeres. But Elizabeth Blackburn, who got the Nobel laureate for her work, was on campus, and I had lunch with her, and she said that there was a study, and I went and looked for it, and yes, they found that just making a mindfulness intervention with a group of people actually improved the health of their telomeres. So you're going to, someday soon, we'll be able to go into Walgreens and get our telomeres length measured, the length of our telomeres assessed, but not yet. But they're good biomarkers of, our health. And mindfulness seems to make an impact, which is pretty extraordinary. And then I know last year you had someone talk about self-compassion. I hope you were all here. And the components of self-compassion, the self-kindness, it's not judging ourselves, being mindful. Here we have mindfulness, not identifying with, the difficult feelings that we have. Again, the secrets, we're not going to just get stuck there. So self-compassion is another component of resilience that we need to pay attention to. And efficacy is really central as well. And Al Bandura, who's at Stanford, who died recently, what a leading figure in psychology, unbelievable person and thinker. He came to Santa Clara. He made a note on a poster to me, Dale, may the efficacy force be with you, but may the efficacy force be with all of us, because that sense of efficacy is so important, and it undergirds almost all of our coping efforts. And we also, and you've been told this so many times, we've all been told this, and number one finding in social sciences almost is that social support is good for our health. It's good for our psychological and physical health. And again, back to having a confidant or confidants. could be a support group, a friend, colleague, counselor you can share your authentic self with. And I could say a lot more about social support and the dynamics of that, but we have to find the courage to reach out and share and find someone who can really be there for us. And I want to say that one of the key and for me most intriguing findings has been over all these years the developing idea and the research findings supporting the idea that meaning and purpose in life are good for us. Now, if we go back to some of the studies, early studies, having, for example, David McClellan at Harvard, having undergraduates watch films of Mother Teresa and finding that their immune functioning improved just watching Mother Teresa. But a large number of studies now looking at which just observing caring is good for us. But a large number of studies looking at caregiving with Parkinson's and Alzheimer's, finding that actually it is not some kind of terrible impact that people are experiencing. Yes, there are very difficult situations, and yes, I'm not glossing over. I don't want to trivialize the distress in any of my presentation today that we experience in these situations. So please, really know that. At the same time, what's coming out is that when we can engage in these situations, find meaning and purpose, and the new term is eudaimonia, or it's a very old term actually, it's the Greek term for a kind of happiness that transcends just momentary happiness, like, oh, my wife and I are watching a great Netflix program, or going to a Stanford Santa Clara basketball game for me, or playing table tennis, whatever brings me happiness, but it's at a certain level. This is a deeper level. This is it comes from connection with our values, living a life aligned with our values, and finding meaning. Although, as one doc said to me recently, he said, "Yeah, there's a lot of meaning in this work, but I just don't have time to find it." I'm sure some of you can relate to that. What comes out of the literature is that, a sense of purpose in life associated with a reduced risk for all-cause mortality and cardiovascular events. Okay, this is pretty dramatic. Also, another compilation, a strong correlation exists between well-being, happiness, health, and longevity of people who are emotionally and behaviorally compassionate. So compassion, as I've been saying, is really a stress buffer, and it also promotes growth and psychological growth and us achieving our goals in life, so long as they are not overwhelmed by helping tasks. And that's why we need to have balance. So do good, and feel good, do good. Also, I have a feel good, do good principle. If when we do good, when we feel good, we're doing good is a lot easier. And then, all this is undergirded by the fact that we are designed this way. We have an altruistic brain. How else could it be, that helping others would not be good for us? That just couldn't be. It's a brilliant evolutionary quid pro quo, such that by helping others, we are actually helping ourselves. Although the press on this has always been, oh, burnout and watch out and be careful. No, find ways to help others, find ways to express our basic humanity, and that will be good for us. It'll be good for our immune systems. It'll be good for us psychologically and physically. And I like to show that just the word compassion, if you look at it more closely, we see that it has passion in it, it has compass in it, and it has compassion. And I think compassion is the compass that can guide our passion in life. And who do we turn to, to kind of get some inspiration? Well, we have Einstein, only a life lived for others is worthwhile. We have Dame Cicely was dear to me. I could tell you some stories about Dame Cicely, but inspirational. She and Carl Rogers, who is another major person in my life, both said, respect the individual, be yourself, and as central, and listen to others. Those are the three principles that both of them really spoke so much about. and her as the great leader in hospice, and Gandhi, of course, who said, whatever you do may seem insignificant, but it's very important that you do it. How many times have you felt like I did something good for someone and I never heard back, or I didn't think I made a difference, but then you hear later that conversation was so important. That communication in the chat box really meant a lot to me, and you didn't think it really made a difference. This is so true in helping. We often don't see the results, the impact. Martin Luther King, life's most persistent and urgent question is, what are you doing for others? And Mother Teresa, there's joy in transcending self to serve others. I mentioned the David McClellan study a moment ago. And then Schweitzer, I don't know what your destiny will be, but one thing I know, the only one among you who will be truly happy are those who will have sought and found how to serve. He also said, if we lose a reverence for any part of life, you've lost it for all of life.